Hello, Blake Rudis here, and we're still doing the 30 for 30. The 30 critique sessions in 30 days. We're on day 10. I'm really excited to get in the critique and look at Brad BOLVES' image here, but before we begin, we have a plot twist, and this one's interesting. Atlee Wolf says, great stuff, Blake. I had never thought of painting with blend modes, another great option in the toolkit. That was from a reference from day 9. Twist, use the sponge tool to fix at least one of the major disconnects in the image. Bonus points for using it more than once. Dang. Like I said to Lee here, I haven't used the sponge tool since 1999. I have been using Photoshop for 26 years. And I think that maybe, even in 1999, I might have used it twice and said, what's the point of this tool? But I got to use it now because I've just been sponged. You can just call me Sponge Blake Square Educator. I think that, honestly, I think that adults shouldn't be unattended with AI. And, yeah, maybe after this tutorial, I'm going to get expunged. Our critique image comes from Brad BOLVES. Thank you so much for submitting this. You know, what I really like about this is the engaging yellow that we see in the background, that fall foliage that's back there, and the wonderful fog that's just wisping around that barn building there. And I do enjoy the space that you're creating for me here, because I feel as if I could, walk through the foreground there as a viewer leading up to this place. You didn't just give me a very literal crop of just the building. You're giving me some foreground that I should be walking through. And I think that that's really important to embrace the viewer in that space. And I do like that. I like the mood and the feeling that you have here. You have this foggy, dreary day that's juxtaposed by some bright yellow coloring in the foliage. And one of the things that we should pay attention to is that when you have overcast or cloudy days, pay attention to the color. You'll see that the greens are really vibrant. The yellows are really vibrant when you don't have the sun reflecting off of them and creating any reflections that would bounce back into your camera. One thing that can help on a sunny day for that is to have a CPL filter so that almost all the foliage looks like what it would look like in an overcast day. But with this overcast day image, some might think, well, those colors are pretty bold and vibrant. Well, if you really pay attention during an overcast day, the colors can be pretty bold and vibrant with even just the most minimal amount of color. However, I do have a disconnect, and that is the color. I think it's really just the color in the foreground. It feels like just a wash of yellow, and I can't really gather any texture inside of that yellow. I do also feel like 50% of your canvas is given to the foreground, and it's not necessarily a low enough angle for me to feel like I'm in the weeds. I'm still above them. So if you actually took your camera and went below the weeds, what would happen is I would lose the bottom of the building. So I get what you're doing here, but I think that maybe a little bit too much of your composition is being given to the foreground. So we'll take a look at the composition, and we'll also take a look at the color, because there might be something we can do with some color separation in that foreground area to get more of that color to be a little bit less bold and vibrant in the foreground and have some color separation so we have some tonal depth within that color, because it just feels like, if I squint my eyes, it just feels like a wash of color. Those are things that we'll tackle during the work. So my first initial thought was to crop this, because I talked about that in the disconnect. But, now that I think about it, this might be one of those things where I'll do the tone and color work that I'm going to do first and see if maybe that changes the composition of the image for me. Because sometimes tone and color can affect the composition just as much as the elements and where they're placed in the scene. I'm gonna just start with the sponge tool. I honestly don't even know what this thing does. I've kind of forgot, but let's see here. The sponge tool looks like it either desaturates or saturates. Anytime I'm looking at a tool that's relatively new, the first thing I do is click on the tool and then look at the toolbar up here. So this is actually a really good opportunity for you guys to learn something about how to assess whether a tool is useful for you. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer and see if I can use this sponge tool, and it's not doing anything. And that's because the sponge tool itself, if I recall, is like one of those tools that only works on the actual layer itself. So I told you that this is kind of saturated for me. So let's change this to desaturate, not saturate. And I'm going to bring this up a little bit higher just so I can see what it does first. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just start brushing this in the areas where I want this to desaturate. And you see what's happening here. All the sponge tool does is either desaturate something, or if I switch it, it will saturate something. But it has to be on the actual physical layer itself. This cannot be done on its own layer. So this is kind of an antiquated tool in my personal opinion. This is an opportunity for us to discuss what could be done other than using this. Instead of using the sponge tool, maybe we could use something like an HSL adjustment layer with a mask on it. That would give us infinitely more control than something like the sponge tool. So it was cool to see the sponge tool, but I don't really like where that's going. But it did give me an idea. It gave me an idea because as I started to desaturate this stuff over here, I thought to myself, well, what else can I use for this? Well, what I'm going to use for this is actually a curve. But I'm going to do something that we did in one of the other critique sessions. I don't even remember what day it was at this point. I couldn't even recall. But I'm going to take the polygonal lasso tool, and I'm going to draw a line from here down to here because I'm starting to see that there's kind of a V shape here in the way that this light is directed. And I'm going to go right up to here just like this, and then come back around and then make a connection. So I'm basically making just a selection for this area right here. Now I'm going to set this to a curve, okay? And with that curve, I'm just going to make it a little bit darker, okay? Just like that, okay? So as I make this curve darker, I notice that it's not just making that area darker, it's also making it much more contrasty in the color. So if I were to change this to luminosity, I just don't necessarily like that effect as much. So I'm going to leave that at normal, and I'm going to show you another way that instead of working with luminosity, you can ask yourself a question. What don't we like about the color that's happening here? Okay. Well, what I don't like about the color that's happening here, well, first of all, I don't like the fact that there's no feathering here. So let's look at our mask, and we'll move our feather up just like this, just like this, just like this, to about there. Once I can't see the lines anymore, that's where I want this, because this is kind of like a vignette. You know, we talked about not using vignettes, but this is a way that you can use something like a vignette to draw the eye to that. So we can already see that now that feathering has done a wonderful job, actually, of making that a little bit better. But let's go into the curve itself. And I'm not going to fear going into the color curves. So we did see that when we made this darker here, it also added a lot of color contrast. Well, what color contrast did it add? So let me go back to this feather. We're at about 126 pixels. I'll bring it down just so we can see this. It looks like it's a little bit too red. So I'm going to go into the curve, and I'm going to go into the red channel. If it's too red, what do I need to do? Pull this down, and then it gets less red. Or we're adding cyan. Now, the reason why I use curves for this a lot of times instead of reaching for other tools is think about it this way. This section right here is for your darkest darks. This section right here is for your midtones. And this section's for your highlights. So if I pull this down in the midtones, and then I pull this up in those shadows, this won't affect the shadow areas quite as much. You see that as I move and manipulate this? And then I'll pull this curve for the highlights and make those highlights a little bit more on the cyan side. So I'm basically sculpting out the color with the light. So when I look at this, I might need a little bit more green in here. Okay, so I'll bring that green up so we get a little bit more green. I did talk about there being a lack of color separation. Look at the fact that we have this very strong orange and yellow right here. But here we actually have quite a bit of green that's coming through, but that's only being seen because of what we're doing with our curve work. So now I'm going to go into the mask and bring that back up to that 126 mark. So it just kind of blends really nicely. I think it was 120. So let's just make it an even 125. I think it's kind of weird if we make it 126. And we'll delete that. And look at that. Wow, that is pretty cool actually. So now I can control how much of that comes through with the RGB curve and where it comes through with the RGB curve. And look at those darks. Oh, that's nice. And then we'll also lift this up so those darks aren't quite as heavy. And then look at this weird curve. Like, where in the world would this curve actually work? If we press and hold shift and we click on the mask to oh my gosh, this looks like zombie apocalypse, doesn't it? Like we should be running into that barn because behind us is a bunch of zombies. That's what that curve actually looks like with no mask on it. But look at an intentional mask with an intentional blur really helped resolve this. And we actually got the idea from the sponge tool. So I'm pretty glad I got sponged this morning. That sounds really bad. Okay, so one last thing I'm going to add here is I want to add a reflected beam of light to draw the viewer's eye into this area here, and then we'll do a tone assessment on that. Let's just do a tone assessment on it now while we're here. In the self-critique guide, we have this thing right here called the tone navigation map, so we can see how our tones are guiding the viewer. Look at the before. You see that? I had a problem with this before, right? I had a problem with the whole crop before. I haven't even thought about cropping this now that I did this. You see that? Because we're creating a more engaging space for the viewer in this space. We're creating some depth in this foreground space here. Now, I chose to draw a triangle shape so I could bring the viewer into a triangle type of composition without them even realizing it. So now if I crop this, I think I'm actually doing more harm than good. So sometimes tone and color can be really strong influencers for our composition. And look at that. Look at that. Oh my. Okay, so I'm going to add a beam of light right here just because I want I want our feet to go right here. I want people to see that when they're being chased by these zombies, that the door is right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on what I call a spotlight, and I have that in the visionary panel. This is basically just a radial gradient that I can move around. And the cool part about this, actually, let me do that. I want to show you this because I just love doing this. I actually do this for fun. I'll put a viewer navigation map on here, double click this warm spotlight, and look, I can draw the viewer's eye wherever I want it to go. Haha, gotcha. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this at the reflected area here, and I'm going to go ahead and drop the scale quite a bit, and then move this up and down until I get that beam of light exactly where I want it. And now we are right there. Now this is set to linear light. Vivid light's a great one too. Let's do vivid light and bring that fill up a little bit. Man, oh man, we're just dragging the viewer right into there. Look at that. Oh man. Okay, Brad. See, before I thought it was too saturated, and it is a little bit too saturated in this foreground area. And hey, Lee, thank you so much actually for the sponge tool, because without it, I probably wouldn't have thought of using a curve down there. So yeah. Could I have used the sponge tool for that? I don't know. Let's see. Because he said if I use it twice, then I get bonus points. So here's my bonus points. Let's desaturate that area. And let's see. Just this on there. But this is destructive, so I wouldn't do this. Don't do this. This is destructive. Oh, it's very destructive. Okay, I'm done. And for our showcase image from HALERYN, we have a bird butt. So one of my best friends in the industry is Matt Kliskowski, and when he was showing me the ropes on wildlife photography, specifically with birds, he was like, dude, one of the last things you want is a bird butt. And I think that that's true in most cases. But in this case, I think seeing the back side of the bird here, as it's looking out at this otherwise rainy day, is really just showing us a different look at what it must be like to be a bird. Like, I look at that bird and I see two different stories happening here. I see this sense of confidence by the way it's got its legs outstretched and its wings looking like they're right about ready to take off, almost like it's like, you know what? I'm going out there anyway. And it's got this air of confidence to it with this single feather just kind of dangling down below it. It feels like a confident bird. Like, no matter what, I can take on anything. But this is also kind of a story about like when I was a kid. I wouldn't say my kids now because they're never bored. When I was a kid, if it was raining outside, you were bored because you had nothing else to do. So I see it from that perspective too, of like maybe this is a bird looking outward saying, man, I wish it weren't a rainy day. I'd love to go fly around. So I see two different stories happening from this image that conjure that from me. And I love the color work. I love the composition and the story that's being told here simply through a bird standing in the rain. You never know what kind of images are just going to grab you, grip you, and really make you think. So one of the main reasons why I like this image is it just makes me think in many different ways. It's just a bird waiting to fly in the rain. But what that shows you is that this artist, Jay, has a vision for this piece that goes well beyond a bird. So a lot of times people ask me, can you really have a vision or a story for a wildlife image? Absolutely. Look at this one. It tells two stories. One is a bold story of confidence, and another one's a bored story of canceled plans. Either way, I love what you've created for us. Thanks, Jay. So just a reminder, we're doing this 30 days, 30 critique sessions, so we can all learn something, absolutely. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm learning something every single day. And I think that this is really cool. Like, that's what I love about these critique sessions on F64 Elite. I learn something new every single time I do one, and so do the members of F64 Elite. But we're also doing this for Give Kids Art. I got a new mug. Someone told me that they didn't like how dirty my mug was, so I got a new mug from Give Kids Art. And that's what we're doing this for. We're doing this for Give Kids Art because every donation that comes in is going towards art kits to give art to kids that wouldn't normally have it. And right now we're at 329 art kits, which translates to over $4,940 in donations. And that's incredible. Just to the idea that this could be at $5,000 by the end of today. I think we're just steamrolling this goal. And I'm really looking forward to see what happens by day 30. However, we still have more to go, and I still need more twists. And if you can get creative like Lee did, maybe we can have some more creative fun with this, and maybe you'll never have to see Sponge Blake again. So yeah, I just had to show it to you one more time. Thanks for watching today's tutorial. Day 11 tomorrow. Love you guys. See ya. Bye.